A woman walked into my office one day, a private investigator's office, with an unusual request. She was an enigma from the get-go. Her eyes held a peculiar gleam, a mix of fear and excitement, and her voice trembled slightly as she laid out her request. "I want you to stalk me," she said, and the words hung in the air, heavy and strange. You could have heard a pin drop in that moment. I had been in the business for over 2 decades, seen all sorts of things, but this was a first. I was no stranger to odd requests, but this one took the cake. A woman wanting to be stalked? It was something out of a bizarre movie, not something you'd expect to encounter in the humdrum life of a private investigator. Her reasoning? Self-love, she claimed. She wanted to understand herself better, to see herself from an outsider's perspective. It was an odd way to go about self-discovery, to say the least. I was torn, to be honest. Part of me wanted to turn her away, tell her to find a therapist, not a private investigator. But another part of me, the part that had been in this business long enough to know that things aren't always as they seem, was intrigued. Was there more to her story? Was this just a cry for help disguised as an eccentric request? In the end, curiosity got the better of me. I was a private investigator after all, and the unknown was my bread and butter. I decided to take on the case, despite the nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I was stepping into uncharted territory. Against my better judgment, I decided to take up the case, not knowing what I was getting myself into. The next morning, I started my surveillance. Little did I know this case wasn't going to be like any other. As the first rays of sun pierced through the morning mist, I found myself parked outside her house, a nondescript suburban dwelling. The initial days were uneventful, almost mundane. She followed a routine as predictable as the rising sun. A morning jog, a visit to the local grocery store, a 9-to-5 job at a nearby office, and evenings spent at home. I observed her interactions, or the lack thereof. She seemed to be a woman of few words. Her social interactions were limited, mostly restricted to her coworkers and the occasional neighbor. She was as normal as anyone could be. Yet, there was something about her, an unseen weight she carried, hidden behind her seemingly ordinary life. As I delved deeper into the surveillance, I found myself intrigued by her. The question that kept me awake at night was not about who she was, but rather why. Why would someone with such an ordinary life want to be stalked? What was she trying to uncover, or perhaps, what was she trying to hide? The more I watched her, the more I realized that there was a subtle pattern to her life. It was almost as if she was living her life in a loop, repeating the same actions, the same routines day in and day out. It was as if she was stuck in a time warp, unable to move forward. The mundanity of her life was deceptive. It was a facade, a mask she wore to blend into the world, to avoid drawing attention to herself. It was a smokescreen, designed to hide something deeper, something darker. The surveillance was becoming an obsession. I found myself drawn to her, not as a professional investigator, but as a man trying to unravel a complex mystery, a mystery that was slowly beginning to consume me. As days turned into weeks, I realized there was more to this woman than met the eye. Then one day I stumbled upon something that changed everything. As my investigation deepened, I found myself navigating through a labyrinth of secrets and shadows, all leading me to the heart of a troubled past. I unearthed a myriad of old newspaper clippings and court records, each one a piece of the jigsaw that was her life. The headlines screamed of a mysterious death, a woman found lifeless in her home. And at the epicenter of this tragedy was a young girl, barely out of her teens. That young girl was none other than the woman who had hired me, the woman whose life I had been tracking day in and day out for the past 6 months. This revelation sent a jolt through me. The woman I had been following was not just a client. She was a survivor, a daughter grappling with the loss of her mother in the most tragic and unexplained circumstances. With every document I read, every detail I pieced together, the motivation behind her unusual request began to take shape. She wasn't seeking attention or thrill. She was longing for understanding, searching for answers in the most unconventional way. She wanted to be seen, to be acknowledged, to confront her past, face her fears, and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to heal. All the seemingly random actions, the places she visited, the rituals she performed, they were all part of a complex tapestry woven from the threads of her past. Each one was a silent cry for help, a plea to be understood, a step towards confronting the ghosts that haunted her. That's when it hit me, the weight of her sorrow, the depth of her determination. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting, battling her demons, and in her own unique way, trying to make peace with her past. It dawned on me then, this wasn't just about being stalked. It was a journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance. 6 months into the investigation, I finally understood why she wanted to be stalked. The pieces of this perplexing puzzle began to fall into place. The woman who had become the focus of my work wasn't just seeking a thrill or playing some twisted game. No, it was much more profound than that. This act of self-inflicted surveillance was her way of confronting her past, her demons, and ultimately, herself. She had lost her mother under mysterious circumstances, a tragedy that had left her scarred. She carried the weight of unresolved guilt and unanswered questions. The stalking, it seemed, was her way of forcing herself to face her fears, to delve into the darkest corners of her life and come out stronger. It was a unique journey of self-discovery and acceptance, and I found myself, unexpectedly, a silent partner in her quest. As I observed her, I began to see her not as a client, but as a human being looking for closure, seeking answers to questions that haunted her. The woman who had hired me to stalk her was no longer a stranger. She was a person with a story, a narrative that had unfolded before my eyes, touching chords I never knew existed. Her courage was inspiring. It made me question my initial judgments, my preconceived notions. It made me realize that people often wear masks, hiding their true selves, their deepest fears, and their most profound desires. It made me understand that sometimes what appears to be irrational or bizarre on the surface could be a desperate attempt to heal, to grow, to evolve. This investigation had started as an unusual assignment, a job like no other. But it ended up being a journey into the human soul, an exploration of the depths of human emotions and motivations. It taught me that everyone has a story, a battle they're fighting, often in the most unconventional ways. In the end, it wasn't just the woman who discovered herself, but I discovered a deeper understanding of human nature.